feature is, so the first feature we are talking about the manorial system. So what is the manorial system? Manorial system means it is the economic structure. The manorial system means the economic structure which was based on agriculture, and that agriculture was extended to the peasants known as the serfs who were working in the fields in the land of the lords. We call the feudal lords. So just a second, dear friends, just a second. Just a second. Okay, dear friends, I'm talking about what the manorial system we discussed. Next, coming to the vassalage and lordship. Whenever we talk about the vassalage and lordship, it was the political bondage. It was the political relations. It was the political responsibilities between the lords and vassals. Just a second. So people say that I'm talking about the vassalage and the lordship. When we talk about it, it is the political relationship. The manorial system dealing to the economic relationship. The vassalage lordship deals with the political relationship, political responsibilities between the lords and the vassals. And whenever we talk about defense, the lords granted lands. At the same time, they are getting the military services from the fiefs at the time of the emergencies, at the time of the requirement. So whenever the lords required the military services, at the same time, the fiefs were ready to extend it. We call it the reciprocal relationship. Now coming to the next one, the fragmented political powers. So dear friends, I'm talking about the decentralized authority where local lords had control over the justice, taxations, and the military. So now I'm going to talk about the lords at the center, the lords at the local level. So whenever the lords are at the local level, that you must keep in mind, dear friends, they had control over the justice. They maintain the law and order. They improve, they increase the taxation, and also determine the military services. Then we may talk about the customary laws and the rights. In this regard, we may talk about the legal tradition that govern the social and the economic life rather than the centralized state laws. So most important thing is here, when the laws and rights were made, it was made only because to improve the standard or to rule the people socially and to enhance the economic conditions of the people. Now I'm going to talk about it, dear friends, the Marxist perspectives of feudalism. In this regard, everybody knows we're going to talk of the Marxism, Karl Marx, the authority, as well as I'm talking about the Marxist historian. People say regarding the feudalism, Karl Marx, the authority of the Marxism or the Marxist historian, he has pointed out that feudalism is an economic system and which is characterized by the class struggle. Yes, even today in all over the world, there is the class struggle. The who belongs to the lower class, he struggles how to improve or how to be equal with the upper class, how to be equal with the you may talk about the plutocrat class. So there is the class struggle. Among the students, there is the struggle. So class struggle is a continuous process. It was in the ancient times. It is. It was in the medieval times, in the modern times, as well as in the contemporary times. So Karl Marx, the authority on the feudalism, has pointed out that in the society, on the basis of the economy, the class struggle is going on. The rich people, the lifestyle is better than the common people who we are poor in finance, poor in the economic conditions. And in this regard, dear friends, generally, when to talk the feudalism, we see that in the feudalism, the class struggle was made between the landlords in one hand, and in the other hand, we are talking about the peasants. He has developed certain views. He argued certain views. Whenever we talk, the debate is made. What is the arguments of Karl Marx in context to the feudalism? So, dear friends, the first argument is mode of production. And it is the fact, dear friends, when we are talking about the mode of production, which is based on the serfdom, where the peasants produce the surplus for the feudal lords. Second, we may talk about the exploitation. What kind of the exploitation? The lords extracted, exploited surplus through the rent, extra money charged to the common people, to the peasant, to the serfs, in terms of the rent, in terms of the labor services, as well as the feudal dues. So it is that means the feudal lords, if we talk about it today in the democracy, the rich becomes richest, the poor becomes poorest. The same thing in the feudal lords happen. The feudal lords become more rich, they become richest. And in the other hand, dear friends, the common people, the few like metal, the serfs, their condition was more precarious. Their condition was so vulnerable, as you means, dear friends. Then we are talking about, dear friends, another argument, transition to capitalism. So feudalism declined. Whenever we talk about the decline of the feudalism, for your information, feudalism declined due to the development of the monetary economy. And when we talk of the feudalism, it was the agricultural economy. And the feudalism declined due to the rise of the monetary economy. And the bourgeois, we call the merchant class, grew, leading to the capitalism. And the middle class, the merchant communities, they wanted to spend, to invest the capital for generating the industries. And whenever in one hand the industries started to grow up in the Europe, ultimately in the other hand, the feudal system or the feudalism started to decline. So we are going to talk about the criticism. Some scholars have criticized too the Marxist theory of feudalism. That you must keep in mind, friends. Oversimplifying the feudal society by reducing it to the economic factor. Then, according to the Marx, Marx doesn't fully explain the variation in feudalism across the different societies. In the different societies means, what was the feudal system among the feudal laws? What are the feudal system among the manors? What is the feudal system among the castles? So in the different societies, it is the Roman societies, it is in the Egyptian societies, it is in the different countries of the Europe, in the different societies, What was the characteristic feature of the feudalism? It was not properly explained by Karl Marx. So therefore, Karl Marx's view or the Marxist view of a feudalism is criticized. So dear friends, now coming to the European versus non-European feudalism. So when we talk about the Japan, as you mean, historians debate whether feudalism was only existed in Europe or at the same time feudalism was in practice. Feudalism was prevalent in Asia, in Africa, in the Islamic world. That is the matter of the European versus non-European feudalism. So now I'm going to talk about in this regard, that is called the Japanese feudalism. So for your information, dear friends, in Japan, feudalism was in practice. In Japan, feudalism was in practice. How to talk about it? From the sources, we come to know that in Japan, the similar structure what prevailed in the Europe, that is called the vassals. In Japan language, we call it samurai. We may talk the feudal lords. In Japanese language, we call it daimyo. And the king, in the feudal structure, king was there, but king was less powerful. In the feudal structure, king was there, but king's power was not as much the powers of the feudal lords. The feudal lords have the money, the feudal lords has the more property, landed property. The feudal lords, in this regard, I'm talking about it. Then, for your information, dear friends, I'm talking about the shogun. In Japanese language, we talk the shogun, 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 who is equal to the king. But based on the different cultural and the legal tradition. In Japanese feudalism, we came to know that what in the European feudalism, the feudalism was distinct on the basis of the landed property, agricultural land. But in the Japan, it was not only the economic basis you need, it was the cultural and the legal tradition. On the basis of that, the Japanese feudalism was heightened, was entangled, dear friends. Coming to the Indian feudalism. So if you have gone through the Indian history, ancient Indian history of R.S. Sharma. So for your information, R.S. Sharma, the first notable historian of India, who has pointed out that, argued that in the post-Gupta India, the post-Gupta period, we came to know that feudal system was existed. Feudal system was in practice. Feudal system was prevalent, where land grants to officials and warriors led to the decentralization of the governance. So in the post-Gupta period, we came to know that the land grants was given to whom? To the officials. To whom? To the warriors, who were extended both the military service as well as the political services. That we must keep in mind, dear friend. And the purpose was to decentralize the purpose was to decentralize. The purpose was to decentralize the governance. And now going to talk about, dear friends, Islamic and the Chinese system of the feudalism. Just when we talk about it, dear friends, whenever we talk about in the Islamic world, there was also the land tenure system. And when to talk of the feudalism was completely, the feudalism was not completely prevailed, we may talk about prevented full feudalization. I'm Dekhuchi, for your information, some extent in the Islamic as well as in the Chinese system, we came to know that there was the existence, or we may talk about the feudal system or the feudalism was in practice. So now, talking about the debates. So, dear friends, some argued that, dear friends, yes, dear friends, I'm talking to. Some argued, historians argued that feudalism in Europe or the European feudalism was studied in a specific model. Whenever we may talk about the feudalism in the you may talk about in the Africa, you may talk about Asia, they are the broader comparative approach. And in this regard, we may talk about uh, the trend and the decline of the feudalism. So, dear friends, then we may talk about feudalism, forms, and the structures. Just we are talking about, dear friends, feudalism, its forms for your information, and the structures. As far as the forms and structure of feudalism is concerned, for your information, we may talk about the different structures of the feudalism. It is, as you means, the manors, the castles, and whenever we talk about the structure, we came to know that the first that is called the king in the feudal structure. For your information, in the feudal structure, we may keep in mind, dear friends, king at the apex, to is known as the monarchs. And theoretically, not practical, the head, when to talk about the feudalism and its structure, first we may talk of the political structure. And in the political structure, king is the apex, theoretically the supreme ruler, but the king had the limited power. King had the limited control, limited direct control, and granted lands to fiefs, to nobles, in exchange of the loyalty and the military services. That is the responsibility of the king. But whenever we talk about next to the king, the second ladder, the second structure known as the lords, to call the feudal lords. For your information, the feudal lords are generally known as nobles. They are known as the barons. You may talk about the dukes, may talk about the daimos, also you may talk about the samantas. The second category of the feudal structure we're going to talk about the political portfolios concerned. And now, when to talk of the nobles' responsibilities, what kind of the responsibilities they bear with on their shoulders? Number one, they control the large estates. Large estates means the large areas and had their own armies. The feudal lords possesses the own army, personal army they had. Second, the another function, they were empowered to collect the taxes and also extended justice, administered justice. Then we may talk about the third one. The king, very simple to talk, shows allegiance to the king but ruled their territories semi-independently. Even if, when we may talk about the jurisprudence, the feudal structure is made And in the feudal structure, as you know, the feudal lords, they were more powerful than the kings because the king's power was limited. They directly extended their powers. But when to talk the feudal lords, they were enjoying the enormous powers, the pompous personalities such means who were purchased. Now coming to the third structure as part of the political structure of the feudalism is concerned, dear friends. The third category, we call it the vassals. To whom we call the vassals? Vassals are generally known as the knights, the samurais, the ikta holders, and we may talk about the jagirdars. The concept of the jagirdar was more prevalent during the time of the medieval societies in India, during the time of the sultanates as well as the Mughals. And when to talk of the vassals, what was their portfolios? What kind of the life they were leading? So, for your information, dear friends, they were leading the life. They served as the warriors, the military personnel who were ready to extend the military services at the time of the emergency we talk about, or the king declared, the feudal lords declared the war. At the time, the vassals, they were wholeheartedly come forward, yes, to serve the warriors or the military functions achievements. And in Matauka, they were also acted as the administrator. And in lieu of it, whenever they were extended the military services and the administration, at the same time, for your information, dear friends, they received the land. That you must keep in mind. They received the land like the fields, jagirs, iktaj in return for the military services. ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଜମି ଦିଆଯାଉଥିଲା. They were received the land for the extension, the land in name of the fields or the jagirs or the ikta, and they were extended the military services. The fourth category, as per the political structure or the structures of the feudalism is concerned, dear friends, that we are talking about the peasants. The fourth category, the peasants, to whom we call the serfs, we call the villains, we call the riots, roitas, kishans. When we talk about the roitas term in the ancient world, in the medieval times, also the term roit is prevailed today. Suppose if people may talk about the Athagad region, ଆପଣ ଆଠଗଡ଼ ରିଜନରେ ଦେଖିବେ ଯେ ଚାଷୀମାନଙ୍କୁ the peasants were known as the roitas. So their responsibilities was, their function was tied to the land, just like they were born and brought up with the land. Without land, their life is meaningless, and they were not leading the better the luxury life, like the upper three structures, that is the laws and of the fashions. And they were extended the labor. So the pigeons were extracted, and the laborers, they were responsible for the production and also rent to the lords. Had a little, no political powers, if I may talk about it. The pigeons had no political power. Now I'm going to talk about, dear friends, the economic structure. The economic structure is known as the manorial structure, the economic structure. As far the economy is concerned, dear friends, the first one is the manor. Manors known as the fief, jagir, and ikta. Dear friends, when to talk with the manors, a self-sufficient agricultural estate controlled by a lord, to whom we call the manors. Dear friends, for your information, I'm talking about it. Manor means they, very simple to talk, a self-sufficient agricultural estate controlled by a lord. So a lord possesses, a lord had a self-sufficient agricultural estate, and that was controlled, that was monitored, that was looked after by the lord only. Next to the serfs, to whom we call the agricultural laborers. So dear friends, economical they were not sound, they were treated as the agricultural laborers. They worked the land, paid the taxes, and that taxes on crops, labor, and money. They may extend the labor, they may extend the money, or they extend the crops. And in this system, when to talk the source, for your information, dear friends, after that we came to know the three-field system. Three-field system means the crop rotation method that improve the agricultural output, means to plow the land to produce the production thrice in a year with the different crops. As a result, the landed fertility would increase. There is less possibilities of the decrease of the fertility of the land. Next, we are talking about the guild and the trade system. So, dear friends, when I talk of the guild and the trade, yes, in the late feudalism, generally the towns and the merchant communities grew, and that the towns grew up only because of the existence of the trade and commerce, and due to the promotion of the trade and commerce, the guild system developed. What is the guild system? Guild system is an association. It is a group of the people, of the traders, who had the right to perform, to look after, to monitor law and commerce, law and order, regulate the trade and commerce, the increase of the taxes, extending the trade and the commerce with the internal and the external. So lots of things being taken into the account or the portfolios when to talk about, your friends, the guilds and the trade in the late feudalism is concerned. Generally, the towns developed, the guild system developed, the merchants grew up, and the town's importance increased. As far as, dear friends, the economic structure is concerned. Now coming to the social structure. So dear friends, I'm talking about what? I'm talking about the social structure. Even if I talk about it today, social structure is, in case of India, case of Bharat is concerned, we have the social structure like the four Varnas, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudras, and among the four Varnas there are the lots of castes. Similarly, when to talk about the social structure, yes, in the Bharat, the social structure was partly rigid and partly flexible. But for your information, whenever we talk about the social structure of the feudalism, dear friends, there is a rigid hierarchy, and the birth determines the status. Suppose one born in the serf community, one born in the king's heredity, king's community, you may talk about, one born in the noble class, one born in the vassal class. So birth determines the status. But in case of Bharat, we have the example, uh, Kutabuddin Aibak was a slave. He was just the water carrier, but he ruled over, laid the foundation of the Sultanate age in India. That you must keep in mind, dear friends. Here, birth is not a determined. In case of Bharat now, Suppose one borns in the Sudra community, but he is performing the Brahminical tenets, Brahminical rituals. So from that point of view, when to talk about the social structure of Bharat and the social structure in the feudal society, the social structure was, for your information, rigid hierarchy, and here birth determines the status of the king, the nobles, vassals, and the peasants. So now coming to dear friends, whenever we're talking about it, the primogeniture. What is the primogeniture? Primogeniture means the land was inherited by the eldest son, keeping wealth in the noble family. When to talk of the noble family, we came to know that the eldest son was the important person with whom the land was inherited. And in that structure, when to talk about the females, they were not getting that much of the respect and the possession of the landed property comparison to the eldest son. Then we may talk about in the social structure, yes, in the feudal structure, in the feudal society, it may be in the Europe, there was the church influence. Church was the cradle for that purpose. People might have gone through it. In 1789, Voltaire was pointed out that he has pointed out that church was the den of the superstitions. So church influence was there in the medieval society, particularly in the feudal structure, feudal society. Church was the powerful and owning the land influencing the politics. That you must keep in mind, dear friends. So in this regard, when we are talking about it, the church was powerful, owning land and influencing the politics. The three major functions carried and taken away by the church. One is the powerful because from time to time the church was making the laws. Number two, the church had its own landed property, and also the church plays an important role to influence the politics. Now coming to, for your information, we discussed that is, uh, yes, firm structure has made. Now coming to, we're talking about the third part bit. We're talking about the third bit that is called phases of. We may talk about it, dear friends, phase of feudalism. Phase of feudalism. So whenever we talk of the phases of the feudalism, we see the historians of the nationalist historians, or you may talk about the, the Marxist historians, the historians with the Allied age, or you may talk of the colonial historians. They have been pointed out that feudalism has many phases. The first phase, we call it the early phase. Early phase means that is called the formation phase, 5th to 9th century CE. And whenever I mean the Christian era, in that phase, we came to know that developed after the collapse of the centralized empire, Roman Empire in Europe, Gupta Empire in India. So after the decline of the Gupta Empire was controlled the central power. Ujjain was its capital. And after the Gupta Empire in India, we came to know that in the post-Gupta period, there was the feudalism. And the same thing has happened after the fall of the Constantinople, if we talk about it, or the Roman Empire in Europe, there was the political power became decentralized at that time, and local lords gained control over the land. Whenever the central political power was lost its status, At that time, I'm talking about it, dear friends, the political power became decentralized. And as a result, the local laws, they gained control over the land as well as the military department. And here also we notice the land grants and the vassalage. The rules, the rulers extended, the rulers were extended the land grants to the nobles, whom we call the lords, and in return, they granted the land to the vassals, whom we call the knights. And if we talk about in Europe, for your information, in India and in Japan. In Europe, we may talk about the post-Roman kingdom, where we notice the feudalism was there, and the Frankish Empire under the Charlemagne. Similarly, we may talk about in India, after the fall of the Gupta Empire, for your information, the decline of the central authority of the Guptas, a new system took birth that may talk about the Samanta system. And that Samanta system is known as the feudal laws that you must keep in mind, dear friends. And when to talk about in the Japan, there is the rise of the daimos, or you may talk about daimyo. Daimyo means the lords and the samurai warriors in the Han period. So this was the early phase when to talk about the phase of the feudalism. Next phase, that is called the peak phase. Feudalism reached at its climax. Feudalism reached at its the pinnacle when to talk about the classical form of feudalism is concerned for your information. And when to talk about its the timeline, we may talk about it from 9th century to 13th century. So what are the central characteristics of the classical feudalism? And whenever we talk about the friends, the classical feudalism, there was the major characteristics. What are the characteristics? First of all, the feudal relationship was made by the king, nobles, vassals, peasants, and the serfs, which is called the pyramidal structure as far as their portfolio is concerned. Next, we may talk about strong lord vassal ties. Difference. Whenever we talk with the lords had private armies as well as the judicial powers over their land. So that we talk about the feudalism are the peak in the classical period, where the lords they became the almighty than the kings, because the kings became the subordinate and the lords became the primary. It is because they had their personal army and also they enjoyed the judicial powers over their lands. And the third one, when we talk about it, serfdoms, general the peasants who were tied up to the land owned by the laborers or tasks of the Lord, and they toiled from morning to dusk. They don't have the freedom, political freedoms, the social freedoms, any kind of freedoms that they didn't enjoy. Then talking about the church influence, the friends. Here we are talking about the church influence. Yes, in the classic phase it was happened. For your information, dear friends, in the classic phase of the feudalism, or where feudalism was reached at the peak in the Europe, that we must keep in mind, dear friends. What do we notice? We notice the church dominated the feudal society. It is in terms of the power, it is in terms of the positions, it is in terms of the ruling. So, from the many corners, there was the church influence as far as the classic period is concerned. And now we are talking about, dear friends, the economic and the social stability that we must keep in mind, dear friends. I'm talking about the economic and the social stability. Very simple to say, dear friends. The trade during the feudal system, particularly in the classical phase. So at that time, for your information, trade was limited and economy was self-sufficient and economy was rural-based economy. If we can take the example, in Europe, particularly the feudal monarchies like the England, France, and in the Holy Roman Empire, we notice that that is called the mature phase or the classical phase of the feudalism. Similarly, dear friends, when we are talking about, for your information, in India, the post-Gupta period to the early Sultanate period, the land was granted, the land was given to whom? To the Brahmins, as well as to the temple. The Brahmins, the land is known as the Brahmandeya. The land extended to the temples known as Agraharaj. So these were the two kinds of the land grants which were prevalent in India, and that land grant was given only because of the administration of the temple in one hand, and in other hand, you can talk about the extension of the service. Similarly, dear friends, in 1185 to 1333, at that time, when we talk about in Japan also, like the Kamakura Shogunate, where the samurai culture was thrived. And now we are talking about the third phase of the feudalism. Dear friends, whenever we may talk about the third phase for your information, it was between 13th century to 15th century. In that time, what happened? Gradually, the feudal structure started to lose because what the bondage was during the time of the classical phase of the feudalism, like the feudal lords, thieves, the peasants. However, the feudal tie was strong in the late feudalism. In the third phase, it was weak, and the lords lost the power as monarchies centralized control. And the lords lose the power, and ultimately the monarchies they became centralized. That we must keep in mind. And similarly, we may talk about it, growth of the towns and the trade. In the third phase of the feudalism, we came to know that the towns started to sprang up. The towns started to grow. Why the towns are growing? If we talk about Bhubaneswar is a town, towns are generally grown keeping certain features. The major feature is if there is the growth and the development of the industries. And for your information, dear friends, surrounding the industries, we came to know that, for your information, the towns are developed, many communities like the labor, the engineers, then we may talk about the administrators, marketing. So for your information, the different types of the communities are developed. As a result, education grown up, schools, colleges, and universities grown up. So therefore, the root cause or the root factor of growth of the towns, that is called the investment of the money. We may talk about the investment, capital investment of the capitals. So day by day, from, for your information, 13th to 15th century, in all over the world, we come to know towns grown up, trade facilitated to the growth of the towns. And ultimately, when I talk about it, friends, it was because of the money-based economy. So, from 13th to 15th century AD, or the C as you mean, the trade and commerce was monitored by the money-based economy, not the land-based economy. Or we may talk about the agricultural-based economy. Next, we may talk about the many pigeons or revolts occurred in 1381. For your information, in England, there was the pigeons revolt. Serfs demands more rights. That is your responsibility too. Whenever the serfs they are toiled from morning to dusk without any rights, without any freedoms. So once upon a time, the time should come, they must demand, or that is the characteristic feature of the mankind, of the human society, that when one is violated, a time came when the human being demands for his rights. So as a result, we came to know that in 1381 in England, for your information, 1381 in England, there was the English Pigeon Revolt. Purpose was what? Demand for the rights, political rights, the economic rights, you may talk about it, social rights. Now coming to the military change. So prior to 13th century, dear friends, prior to the 13th century, there was no introduction of the gunpowder, long bows, standing armies. So that is called the military change. As a result, the feudal knights became less important, made feudal knights less important. And the king again became more important because the king and the feudal lords had the money, had the power. As a result, they procured, they stored the gunpowders and the longbows, and at the same time, standing armies that we are talking about it. Then the decline of the manorial system. And decline in the third phase, as per the phases of the feudalism is concerned, the lords hired labor instead of relying on serfs. So the serfs, they knowledge, they became more reliable. At the meantime, the lords hired the labor by or through the money. If we may talk about the examples in Europe, 1337 to 1453, there was the 100 Years' War. In Europe, there was the constant war, and it continued for near about 100 years. And that collapsed. The feudal system weakened the feudal laws. In the same thing happened in Delhi, particularly in India, Bharat. Delhi Sultanate and the Vijayanagara Empire, so centralized administration. So feudalism is losing its status, and again the imperial, like the Vijayanagara Empire or the Delhi Sultanate, they again extended the centralized administrative structure. In the Japan, the same thing happened. Shift from the feudal warfare to the Tokugawa unification in the 16th century. It is the third phase, and whenever we may talk about, dear friends, the fourth phase of the feudalism, that is called 15th to 8th century, 18th century. High feudalism, once upon a time, for a long period of time, feudalism dominated the European society as well as the society of Bharat. Not only Bharat, you may talk about the China, you may talk about Africa, you may talk about Japan. So such a long cherishable socio-economic and political organization, the political association, was collapsed 15th to 18th century. Why it was collapsed? Number one, rise of strong monarchy. For your information, friends, whenever we are talking about it, in France, Louis XIV came to the power, who belongs to the Bourbon dynasty, followed by the Louis XV, followed by Louis XVI, followed by Marie Antoinette. So rise of the strong monarchy gave a terrible death blow. That you must keep in mind. It gave a terrible death blow. So the kings took power from the nobles. So again, from the nobles, the kings took over the power. And Louis XIV of the France was the glaring example. It is another cause. Second cause, the promotion, propagation, and spread of the capitalism. That you must keep in mind. Whenever, for your information, expansion of the trade and capitalism. Due to it, in the medieval Europe, what happened for your information? We come to know cities, the merchant guild, the towns, big in size, small in size. So they became powerful. As a result, gradually feudalism became declined. Then we were talking about the peasant emancipation. For your information difference, in the various regions of Russia, in the year 1861, what we notice? We notice abolition of the serfdom. Serfdom को abolish करा गया in the various regions of Russia. And in 18th, 19th century in England, the industrial revolution took place. Sometimes the questions happen. Why the industrial revolution took place in England, not in other countries of the world? So, dear friends, when we are talking about the industrial revolution took place in England due to the manifold reasons. Just prior to it, there was the development of the Renaissance. And due to the development of Renaissance in Europe, more particularly in England, the means of communication was well policed. Introduction of the railways, availability of the raw materials, and most important thing is here, due to the failures of the feudalism, what we notice, dear friends, the availability of the peasants. For your information, dear friends, the availability of the peasants, because the peasants were available at a cheap wage. Raw materials, I told, the strategic location of England. So from the manifold regions, we came to know that and shift to the factory-based economy. So industrial revolution gave the death blow. Industrial revolution gave the death blow to to feudalism. So for the first time, the world witnessed, not only Europe, at the same time, in the different part of the world. What happened, for your information, we came to know that. For your information, we came to know that there was the shift to the factory-based economy to the feudal labor system. It was all about your feudalism, as we means, dear friends. Okay, just 5 minutes to have rest. Just I'm coming. Just I'm coming. Okay. Now we are going to talk about, dear friends, in our early discussions, we have made the early human societies that we have discussed, the Bronze Civilization, Egypt, Harappa, Mesopotamia, that civilization have been finished, then the Roman, the Greek civilization that we have been discussed. Then we are going to discuss about the social structure. Today, going to talk about feudalism. We finished. Going to discuss about the social structure in Latin America. We are going to discuss about the social structure in Latin America. So, for your information, dear friends, whenever we talk about the social structure in Latin America, it is one of the important aspects. It is one of the important aspects as far as our paper is concerned, that is the ancient world and the medieval societies. Dear friends, when we are talking about the social structure, it's quite important. Whenever we must study the society, it may be of a community, it may be a region, it may be the state, it may be the continent, whatever we may talk about it. So social structure is the backbone of the analysis when the analysis is made. And whenever we talk about the social structure in the Latin America, particularly during the time of the colonies, the England ruled over America through the colonies, and gradually they established 13 colonies. And as a result, once upon a time, the British ruled over America. Politically, the Americans were lost their rights. Economically, the Americans were exploited because the British extracted the materials from the colonies and post-colonial periods. So we may talk about the social structure, what was in the or in the colonial period as well as the post-colonial period. Dear friends, the Latin American society, the Latin American social structure, it was shaped by, it was confined, it was designed by pre-Columbian civilization, Spanish and the Portuguese colonization. Then we talk about the latter independence movement. These are the areas that we are going to discuss. And the colonial caste system was based on race and ethnicity. So when we are talking about the American War of Independence, for your information, the British procured the slaves. We call it the transatlantic slave trade from Africa. The British procured the slaves from the Africa and they were working in America. So therefore the colonial caste system based on the race, jati and the ethnicity means their domicile. And they played a very dominant role in defining the society, social structure, social hierarchy, and over the time, we came to know that not only there was the change in the society, but also the change happened, dear friends, in the field of the economy. We call the financial changes, the economic changes. Also, we may talk about the revolutions, like we talk about the American War of Independence. Why it was happened? Because the Americans, the colonies of the America, like we may talk about the Massachusetts, we may talk about the Florida, we may talk about the Connecticut, we may talk about the Virginia. So these were the colonies established by British in America. And later on, the Americans, particularly the American colonies, they raised the voice against the motherland, mother country, like we talk about the British. And in this regard, dear friends, we are talking about the social structure that is before 1492. Everybody knows 1492. Due to the discovery of the Columbus, the sea route to America. So prior to it, what was the social conditions of Latin America? The friends, the Latin America was home to several urban civilizations. Like in America, Latin America, when I talk about in Latin America, particularly Mexico, a place where the Aztec society was existed, established. And put the Aztec civilized society, the Inca society, the Maya society. So different societies sprang up, spread over. That we must keep in mind, dear friend. And whenever we talk of the Aztec society, dear friends, the Aztec society was classified with the pyramidal structure. The first one is emperor. Who was the emperor of the Aztec civilization? He was Hue Taltoni. Huey, Hue Taltoani. TLA Talatoani. Toani. Talatoani. Talatoani was the supreme, the apex. When to talk the social structure is concerned, he was getting the prestige, he was getting the positions, power, and the respect from the other societies, and to whom we call, dear friends, divine authority. That you must keep in mind, dear friends. And the next one, we may talk about the nobility. As per the Aztec society is concerned, the first, the emperor, second, nobility, and the nobility known as the Pipiltin, Pipiltin. And in this regard, we came to know, dear friends, the priests from this section, the priests, warriors, and the high-ranking officials, they were coming. They were coming under the nobility class. And next to the emperor, they also enjoyed the same status with luxury. Economical, they were sound. Political, they were empowered. Social, they were well structured. Then we will talk about the commoners, the common people. Commoners means the common people to whom we may use the term the Machihulatin. From this category, we came to know the farmers. Then we may talk about the artisans. We may talk about the merchants. They belong to that class. And the last but not the least, we are talking about the serfs and the slaves. So, dear friends, When we are talking about the serfs and the slaves, they are known as the Talta, Taltan Quotin, we may talk about. The Tal Quotin, people in debt or war captives. Generally, it is happened, dear friends. People in debt and the war captives means during the time of the war, who were captured, they are known as the war captives. And these were the social structures as far as the Aztec society, as far as the Latin America is concerned. And similarly, dear friends, we are talking about the Inca society, Inca, INCA, Inca society, or the Inca social structure. The region is the Andes region. When to talk about a difference, Sapa Inca, I'm talking about the as per the society or social structure of the Anka or the Inca civilization is concerned. Inca has a society, like we have the society. So the Inca society, when we talk about the friends, Sapa Inca, that you must keep in mind, who was considered as the ruler as well as the god. And sometimes people might have gone through in case of the Bourbon dynasties, like the Louis XIV, 15th, 16th, and Marie Antoinette, they have been pointed out that they rule in the eyes of the divine theory because the God has sent them to rule the people. The Sapanka is like this. He was the absolute ruler, that you must keep in mind.
କଣ ହେଲା ସାର୍ ଲେଫ୍ଟ ହେଇଗଲେ ନା କଣ?
ନେଟୱାର୍କ ଇସୁ ଥିବ।
ହଁ ପରା।
ବହୁତ କମ ପିଲା ଆଟେଣ୍ଡ କରୁଛନ୍ତି।
ହୁଁ। ସାରଙ୍କ ଫୋନ ସୁଇଚ ଅଫ୍ ହେଇଯାଇଥିବ ଯାହା ଲାଗୁଛି।
ହଁ ହଁ।
ସଡନ ଇଏ ହେଲା ନା କଟିଲା ସଡନ। ଡେଡ ହେଇଥିବ ଫୋନ ବୋଧେ।
ମେ ବି।
ଭୁବନେଶ୍ୱରରେ ବର୍ଷା ବି ହଉଛି। ସାର୍ ଆସିଲେ।
ଆସିଲେ ସାର୍ ଆସିଲେ।
Hello, am I clear?
Yes sir.
Acha, very good. So, dear friends, whenever
Sir, voice are not clear.
we are talking about what?
About the Inca society, sir.
Just a second, dear friends. So, now a discussion was made on Sapa Inca as far as the Inca civilization is concerned, society is concerned. We came to know that he was treated as the Almighty, considered as the God, and who enjoyed all the powers, the fountain of justice, head of the executive, legislative, and the judiciary. And then next to the Sapa Inca, we came to know, dear friends, that to the noble class. And among the noble class, we came to know the royal family, and the high-ranking administrators. That you must definitely tell. Then we may talk about Ali, the commoners, for your information, dear friends, as well as the agricultural workers and the laborers. And whenever we may talk about the third category, agricultural workers and the laborers who are tied up to the agricultural land of the nobles, may talk of the kings, or you may talk the feudal lords. So they were known as the Aliu, Ailu, Aylllu, Ailu, commoners as names. And generally they were meant for the agricultural. Then we about servants. In the Inca society, we call it the Anaconas. Anaconas were the servants who extended the service to the rest of the society, maybe to the Inca, to the nobility, to the Ailu, and forced to serve ruling elite in general. And in this, whenever talking about society, was hard indeed, but the social mobility was exist through the military service. We call it hierarchy. There the social mobility was there. Because without the anaconas, the other societies, the other sections of the society, they couldn't survive. So for the servitude of the people, it requires the cooperation of the different sections. And now coming to the colonial structure. Whenever colonial social structure we discuss, that is called the 16th to 19th century, dear friends. After the Spanish of the Portuguese conquest in Latin America, like 1492 to 1533, Latin American society was structured on the basis of hierarchy. In case of India, Bharat, we are talking about. In case of Bharat, we are talking about what? We are talking about the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. But in colonial structure of the Latin America, we call it the casta structure, dear friends. We call it the casta system, the casta structure. In Bharat, we are using the caste structure. So the Spanish crown imposed a strict division of the powers and the economic roles. In this regard, I am talking about the casta system in the Latin America, which is known as the racial hierarchy. So, dear friends, I am talking about the racial hierarchy. For this purpose, we came to know, first of all, the peninsulares, Peninsulares, the peninsulares. Dear friends, the Europeans born in Spain as well as in the Portugal, we call them the peninsulares. Who were they? They held the top government. When to talk about the peninsulares, they occupied the highest strata, occupied the highest position, like it is in the governmental position, it may be in the church, it is in the military position. So we are the trios as far as the Latin American concerned in the medieval society. But see, so the peninsulares, they were important. They played a very vital role because they enjoyed the political powers. Political powers comes through the government. Political power comes through the government and the political rights as we mean. At the same time, we call it the church. I have already told in context of the French Revolution. Voltaire mentioned in his book, in the French society, that church was the den of the superstitions. All sorts of the superstitions, social talos in that March was introduced by the church musicians. Besides, they enjoyed the vast land, they possessed the vast land. The vast pocket of lands was in the hands of the peninsular age. Now, after the peninsular age, the second category that we call, for your information, we call the theology. CRIOLOS. We are talking about, dear friends, the theology. So whenever we are talking about the theology, we call it information. Hello?
हाँ सर वॉइस क्लियर आसुनी सर
Clear Subhani?
ना सर
सर जम्मारू क्लियर आसुनी बहुत प्रॉब्लम
I am in Utkal University campus. I think the rain is going in outside. Therefore, might be the network problem. Am I audible right now? Hello? Hello?
हाँ सर
Yes, sir.
Hello, sir.
Utkalika?
Sir, clear audible होनी sir. टिके just buffering होଉଛି.
Audible होउनी ना बाबा?
Sir, clear audio आସୁନି टिके सुबुची टिके बंद होଉଛି sir.
अच्छा. ତାହେଲେ
sir ବର୍ଷା ବି ତ sir ହଉଛି ଭୁବନେଶ୍ୱରରେ ପୁରା ଜୋର ବି ବର୍ଷା ହଉଛି sir.
I think it would be better if we may stop our next class. We may that class it would be better.
Sir ସେଇଟା ବି sir next class ରେ ଟିକେ ଆଉଥରେ କଣ sir ସୁବିଲେନି କିଛି.
Next class will have on Saturday. It would be better. ମୁଁ ତପନ ସାରଙ୍କୁ ଫୋନ କରୁଛି କି
ଆଜ୍ଞା sir.
ତାକୁ ଷ୍ଟପ୍ କରିଦେବ ବାହାର ବି ଘଡଘଡି ମାରୁଛି ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି
ହଁ sir ଜୋର ବର୍ଷା ହଉଛି sir. ପଟିଆରେ ବି ଜୋର ବର୍ଷା ହଉଛି sir.
ମୁଁ ବି ଘରକୁ କେମିତି ଯିବି ଇଜ ଏ ଡିଫିକଲ୍ଟ ମ୍ୟାଟର ଠିକ ଅଛି ଆଇ ଆମ୍ ଜଷ୍ଟ କଲିଂ ଟୁ ତପନ ସାର୍ ଓକେ
sir.
ओके सर थैंक यू सर
ସାର୍
Okay, thank you, sir. ଭୁବନେଶ୍ୱରରେ ବେଶୀ ବର୍ଷା ହଉଛି କି?
ବହୁତ ଜୋର ବର୍ଷା ହଉଛି ପୁରା ଘଡଘଡି
ए
ହେଇକି
भाई
ଆଉ ଜୋର ବର୍ଷା.
सर जो
ବ୍ରହ୍ମପୁରରେ
वे
ବି ବର୍ଷା ହଉଛି
गड़गड़ी
କି?
मारुती कहले दैट वाज नाइस
Yes, yes.
ଏମିତି ମୋବାଇଲ ୟୁଜ କରିବା କଥା ନୁହଁ।
हाँ सतरे आमे माने आगुरु किए गोटे आमु इन्फॉर्म करथिले आमे मना कर देइथांदे सारंगु
ହୁଁ
माने सारंगु भी गोटे सेफ्टी फील हे नथिबो ना
ମେସେଜ କରିଦେବା କି
नहीं
ଇମେଲରେ?
सार तो कहले सार कोन ये करिवे कहि तपन सारंगु इन्फॉर्म करिवे आरसी रको सारंगु
ओहो
ए भाई बुक्स विषय रे किछि टिके डिस्कशन नै जाओ भल होइथांदा
ଆରେ ଭାଇ ମାଷ୍ଟର କ୍ୟାଣ୍ଟିନ ଯାଇଥିଲି ସବୁ ବୁକ୍ ଷ୍ଟୋର ବୁଲି ଆସିଲି ଗୋଟେ ବି ୱାର୍ଲଡ ହିଷ୍ଟ୍ରି ବହି ବି ମତେ ମିଳିଲାନି ହେଲା
ୱାର୍ଲଡ ହିଷ୍ଟ୍ରି ପ୍ଲସ ଟୁ ଫାର୍ଷ୍ଟ ଇୟର ପିଲାମାନଙ୍କୁ ମିଳିଯିବ।
ପ୍ଲସ ଟୁ ଫାର୍ଷ୍ଟ ଇୟର ପିଲାଙ୍କ ବହି ଆଣିଲେ ସେତେ ଡିଟେଲ ଆସୁନି ନା ସେ ପ୍ଲସ ଟୁ ଲେଭେଲ ମିଳିଲା ପ୍ଲସ ଟୁ ଲେଭେଲ କିଛି ବି ମିଳିଲା ସାର୍ ଯୋଉ ଅଥର କହିଥିଲେ ସେ ତ ୱାର୍ଲଡ ହିଷ୍ଟ୍ରି ବହି ମିଳିଲେ ଅଥର କଥା କୋଉଠି ମିଳିବ
ଲାଇବ୍ରେରୀରେ ଯାଆନ୍ତୁ।
हाँ
କୋଉଠୁ
मु से जो सार जो कहले डब्ल्यू विच मु खोजी खोजी पूरा
ମିଳିଲା କି
माने पूरा आलिया गेली ना ऑनलाइन भी मिलुनी सेटा की बुक
ଅନଲାଇନ
मु
ମିଳୁନି
सार को हाँ
ଆରେ
ନାଇଁ
ସାର୍
ଆଉ
ଟିକେ
କିଏ
କହିଲା ସେ କ୍ଲାସ ଚାଲିଛି ବୋଲି ମୁଁ କହିପାରୁନି ତାଙ୍କୁ ଟିକେ ପର୍ସନାଲ ଟିକେ ମିଟ୍ କରନ୍ ଯଦି ଅଫଲାଇନ ତାହେଲେ ବେଟର ହେଇପାରନ୍ତା କିଛି ସଜେସନ ମିଳିପାରନ୍ତା କ୍ଲାସ ଟା ଚାଲିଛି
ସାରଙ୍କୁ କିଛି ପର୍ସନାଲ ନମ୍ବର ଅଛି କି ପର୍ସନାଲ ମୋବାଇଲ ନମ୍ବର?
ଅଛି ତ ମାଗିବାକୁ ପଡିବ ଆଉ
ଆଜି ସାରଙ୍କର ଲାଷ୍ଟ ବୋଧେ?
ସଟରଡେ କଣ କ୍ଲାସ ନେବେ କହିଲେ ବା ଆମର ଯୋଉ
ନା
ସଟରଡେ ସଣ୍ଡେ କ୍ଲାସ ଅଫ ରହିବ
नहीं
ଆଉ
सार
ଯୋଉ
जो
ଗୋଟେ
बुक तो
ସାରଙ୍କର
रेकमेंड
ବନ୍ଦ ହେଇଛି ବୋଧେ ସେଇ
करिसेंती
ଅନୁସାରେ ନେଇପାରିବେ ଆଉ
नहीं सार जो बुक रेकमेंड करिसेंती ता छडा आउ किछि बुक्स
ମୁଁ ଆଉ କିଛି ବୁक्स ହିଁ ଖୋଜୁଥିଲି କିନ୍ତୁ ସେତେ କିଛି ସେତେ ବେଟର ବୁକ୍ସ ପାଇପାରିଲିନି देखिए सेठी जो हमर आईजी पाखरे से जो ओल्ड बुक स्टोर अछि ता पाखु गले काले सेठी मिली परियो देखा जिबा।
ଆଉ ଯୋଉ ମାନେ ମ୍ୟାକ୍ସିମମ୍ ଯୋଉ ରେକମେଣ୍ଡ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ଅର୍ଜୁନ ଦେବ ଆଉ ନର୍ମାନ ଲ ଏଗୁଡାକ ମାନେ କିଛି ହେଲ୍ପଫୁଲ ହବନି ନା କଣ?
ହଁ ହବ आराम से हबो वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री जहां भी मिलला हेल्पफुल हबो सिलेबस थिबार अछि माने हैला निश्चिंत हबो। एमिति नाही जे ଗୋଟେ स्पेसिफिक ବହି ଆମେ ନେଲେ ହବ ସେମିତି ନାହିଁ ଯୋଉଟା ଆମେ ପଢି ପାରିବା ଲେଖି ପାରିବା
ହଁ
ପଏଣ୍ଟ ଆଉଟ କରିବାର ଅଛି।
ଓକେ ଚଲୋ ବାय ଆଜି ତ କ୍ଲାସ ମାନେ ଡିସମିସ ହେଲା ଆଉ ଦେଖା ହବ
ଠିକ
ନେକ୍ସଟ
ଅଛି
କ୍ଲାସ ଓକେ ବାय।
ହ୍ୟାଲୋ। ହ୍ୟାଲୋ।
ହ୍ୟାଲୋ ଦିଦି।
ଟିକେ ହେଲ୍ପ ଥିଲା ଟିକେ ଗୋଟେ ଡାଉଟ ଥିଲା ଗୋଟେ ପଚାର ଟିକେ ମତେ ହେଲ୍ପ କରିବେ? ହ୍ୟାଲୋ।
କୁହନ୍ତୁ।
ଆପଣଙ୍କ ଷ୍ଟଡି ସେଣ୍ଟର କୋଉଠି ଅଛି?
ଏଇ ଭୁବନେଶ୍ୱରରେ।
ଆପଣଙ୍କ ଆସାଇନମେଣ୍ଟ ସବମିଟ ହେଇଗଲାଣି?
ହେଇନି ମୁଁ ସେଥିପାଇଁ କନଫ୍ୟୁଜ ଅଛି।
ତ ଗାଇଡ ଲାଇନ ଅଛି ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ 1 ରୁ ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ 31 ନା ବଟ ଆମ ଷ୍ଟଡି ସେଣ୍ଟର କହୁଛନ୍ତି ଆମେ ରଖିବୁ ଅପ୍ରିଲ 6
ଏପ୍ରିଲ କଣ
ପରେ।
କହୁଛନ୍ତି ନା?
ହଁ ଆମର ଗାଇଡ ଲାଇନ ଆସୁଛି
ହଁ
ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ 1 ରୁ ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ 31 ବଟ ଆମ କଲେଜରେ କହୁଛନ୍ତି ନା ଆମେ ଅପ୍ରିଲ 6 ପରେ ରଖିବୁ ପୁଣି କେବଳ ସଣ୍ଡେରେ 11:30 ଯଦି ୱାର୍କିଂ ଡେ ରେ 4:30 ପରେ।
ନା ଦିଦି ସେ ବିଷୟରେ ମୁଁ କିଛି ଜାଣିନି।
ଏମିତି କରୁଛନ୍ତି ନା କଣ ଆମ କଲେଜରେ ଏମିତି ହଇରାଣ ଆମ କରୁଛନ୍ତି କିଛି ଜାଣି ହଉନି। କଲ୍ କଲେ
ତମର କୋଉଠି ଅଛି ସେଣ୍ଟର?
ମୋର ହଉଛି ଷ୍ଟଡି ସେଣ୍ଟର ଏସିଏସ୍ କଲେଜ ପୁରୀ।
ଓ।
ତ ନା ସେ ସବମିଟ ଯୋଉ ଆସାଇନମେଣ୍ଟ ସବମିଟ କଥା ପଚାରିଲେ କିଛି କହୁଛନ୍ତି ନା ମାନେ ପୁଣି ଗ୍ରୁପରେ ଆସୁଛି ଯେ ଫର୍ମ ଫିଲପ ସିଏ ଆମ ଷ୍ଟଡି ସେଣ୍ଟର ଯୋଉ ଅଛନ୍ତି ତାଙ୍କୁ ପଚାରିଲେ ସେ କିଛି ବି ଇନଫରମେସନ ଦଉନାହାନ୍ତି। ତ ଜାଣିଛନ୍ତି ଯଦି ଟିକେ
ମୁଁ ବି
କୁହନ୍ତୁ।
ଜାଣିନି ସେ ବିଷୟରେ କାଲି ଯେତେବେଳେ କ୍ଲାସ ହବ ସେଠି ଡିସକସ କରିଦେବା।
ଆମର କଣ ପୁଣି ଫର୍ମ ଫିଲପ ହବ ଏକ୍ଜାମ ପାଇଁ?
ମୁଁ
ନୋ
ବିଜେପି ଷ୍ଟଡି
ଆଇଡିଆ
ସେଣ୍ଟରରୁ
କିଛି ବି
ବୁଝିଥିଲି ସେ
ଜାଣିନି।
କହୁଛନ୍ତି କି 31 ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ ଲାଷ୍ଟ ଡେଟ୍ ଅଛି।
କେବେ କେବେ?
ବିଜେପି ଷ୍ଟଡି ସେଣ୍ଟରରୁ ବୁଝିଥିଲି କାଲି ସେ କହିଲେ କି 31 ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ ଲାଷ୍ଟ ଡେଟ୍ ଅଛି।
ବଟ ଆମ ଆମର ଷ୍ଟଡି ସେଣ୍ଟର ହଉଛି ଏସିଏସ୍ କଲେଜ ପୁରୀ କିନ୍ତୁ ସିଏ ମନା କରୁଛନ୍ତି କହୁଛନ୍ତି ଆମେ ଏବେ ରଖିବୁନୁ। ଆମେ ଅପ୍ରିଲ 6 ପରେ ରଖିବୁ ଆମେ ନ ରଖିଲେ କଣ କରିବୁ ବଟ ଏମିତି କୋଶ୍ଚିନ୍ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ନା ଆମେ ପୁରା ସାଇଲେଣ୍ଟ ହେଇଯାଉଛୁ।
ଓହୋ ସେ ତାଙ୍କ ନିଜ ଷ୍ଟଡି ସେଣ୍ଟର ହିସାବରେ କଣ କିଛି କରୁଥିବେ କିନ୍ତୁ ଇଏ ମାନେ କହିଲେ କି 31 ଅଛି ଲାଷ୍ଟ ଡେଟ୍। ଆଉ
ହଁ
ଫର୍ମ ଫିଲପ ତ ଚାଲିଛି ଏପ୍ରିଲ 20 ଯାଏ ଫର୍ମ ଫିଲପ ଅଛି।
କୋଉଠୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଆମର ଏଇ ଏକ୍ଜାମ ପାଇଁ ଫର୍ମ ଫିଲପ ଅଛି ଅପ୍ରିଲ 20 ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ।
ହଁ ହଁ ଯେତେଟା ସବଜେକ୍ଟ
ସେତେବେଳେ
ଦବ ତମେ ଏକ୍ଜାମ ସେତେଟା ସବଜେକ୍ଟ ଫର୍ମ ଫିଲପ କରିବ ପର ପେପର 200 ଟଙ୍କା।
ସେତେବେଳେ ମୁଁ ଭୁବନେଶ୍ଵର ଇଗ୍ନୋ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଯାଇଥିଲି ସିଏ କହିଥିଲେ।
ହଁ।
ସିଏ କହିଥିଲେ ଯେ 9,500 ଟଙ୍କା ତମେ ଆଡମିସନ କଲେ ସିଏ ଗୋଟେ ବର୍ଷର ଫର୍ମ ଫିଲପ ଆଡମିସନ ଫିସ୍ ଟୋଟାଲ ନେଇଯିବେ। ବଟ ଏବେ ଆସୁଛି ଫର୍ମ ଫିଲପ ପାଇଁ ଆପଣ ଯୋଉ ଆଡମିସନ କରିଥିଲେ କେତେ ଟଙ୍କା ଦେଇକି ଆଡମିସନ କରିଥିଲେ?
ମୁଁ ଦେଇଥିଲି 8,200 7,700 କୋର୍ସ ଫି ଆଉ ଚାଲାଣ ଫି କଣ ଗୋଟେ 200 ଟଙ୍କା ଏମିତି କରି 8,200 ଦେଇଥିଲି। ହେଲାନି କି ଆଉ 1,200 ଆଡ କରିଦେଲେ ହେଇଯାଉନି କି 9,500।
ହଁ।
ସେ ଏକା କଥା 9,500 ଦେଇ ଯଦି ତମେ କରିଦବ ଫର୍ମ ଫିଲପ ସହିତ ସେଇଟା ହେଇଗଲା। ଆଉ ଯୋଉମାନେ ଧର ଆମେ ସବୁ ଦେଇଛୁ 8,200 ତ ପୁଣି ଆମେ ଫର୍ମ ଫିଲପ କରିବୁ ତମେ କେତେ ଦେଇଥିଲ କି 9,500?
ହଁ ମୁଁ ଫୋନ पे ରୁ करते 9500।
ତମେ ସେଟା କ୍ଲିୟର କରି ବୁଝିଦିଅ ତମ ଷ୍ଟଡି ସେଣ୍ଟର ରୁ
ଆମ ଷ୍ଟଡି
ମାନେ ନିଜେ
ସେଣ୍ଟର ଆମ
ନିଜେ
ଷ୍ଟଡି
ପକେଇ
ସେଣ୍ଟର କିଛି ବି ଇନଫରମେସନ ଦଉନାହାନ୍ତି।
ନାଇଁ ସେଇଟା ତମେ ଫର୍ମ ମାନେ ଆଡମିସନ ଟା ନିଜେ କରିଥିଲ ନା କୋଉ ମାନେ କାହାକୁ ଦେଇଥିଲ କରିବା ପାଇଁ?
ନା ନା ମୁଁ ଫୋନରେ ମୁଁ ନିଜେ ବସିକି କରିଥିଲି।
ଆଉ
ମୁଁ
ତାହେଲେ ମୁଁ
ଅନଲାଇନ
ଜାଣିନି କଥା ହେଇଯାଅ ଷ୍ଟଡି ସେଣ୍ଟର ସହିତ ସେ ନେଇଯାଇଛନ୍ତି ଯଦି ଫର୍ମ ଫିଲପ ଫିସ୍ ଟା ଆଉ ପୁଣି କଣ ନେବେ କି?
ସିଏ ବା ତାଙ୍କ ଯେତେବେଳେ ମୁଁ ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ 10 ରେ ମୋର ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ 2 ରେ ଆସାଇନମେଣ୍ଟ କମ୍ପ୍ଲିଟ ହେଇଗଲା। ମୁଁ ସବମିଟ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ 10 ରେ ଯାଇଥିଲି।
ଆଚ୍ଛା।
ସେଥିରେ ମୁଁ କଲେଜ ଟି ଯାଇ ତାଙ୍କୁ ମୁଁ ଜାଣିନଥିଲି ନା ଆମର ଯୋଉ ଗୌତମ ସାର୍ କିଏ ତାଙ୍କୁ ମୁଁ ଜାଣିନଥିଲି ତାଙ୍କୁ ମୁଁ ଦେଖିନି କେବେ ବି। ମୁଁ ବାହାରେ ଏସ୍ ଏସ୍ କଲେଜ ଫ୍ରଣ୍ଟ ଭିତରକୁ ଦେଇକି ଫୋନ କଲି। ସାର୍ ମୁଁ ସବମିଟ୍ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଆସିଛି ଟିକେ ସବମିଟ୍ କରିଥାନ୍ତି ଆପଣ କୋଉଠି ଅଛନ୍ତି? ନା ଆମେ ବି ନା ଆମେ ଆକୁ ରଖିବୁନି।
ହୁଁ।
ନା ଆମ ଥାଇ କହିଲେ ଆମେ ରଖିବୁନୁ ମୁଁ କହିଲି କଣ ପାଇଁ? ନା ଆମ ଇଚ୍ଛା ଆମେ ରଖିବୁନୁ କଣ ହେଲା ସେଇଠୁ କି ମାନେ ବେକାର କୋଶ୍ଚିନ୍ କଲେ। ମୁଁ କହିଲି ସାର୍ ଯାଇକି
ସେ କଣ କହୁଛନ୍ତି ଏପ୍ରିଲ 6 ପରେ ସବମିଟ କରିବ ନା ସଣ୍ଡେ?
ମୁଁ ଜାଣିପାରିଲିନି ମତେ କହିଲେ ଆମେ ଏବେ ରଖିବୁନୁ ଅପ୍ରିଲ ପରେ ରଖିବୁ। ମୁଁ ଆମର ତ ଗାଇଡଲାଇନ ଅଛି ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ 1 ରୁ ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ 31 ନା ତମେ କଣ ଆମଠୁ ଅଧିକ ଜାଣିଛ କି?
ତମେ ଆସାଇନମେଣ୍ଟ ଟା କଣ ମାନେ ବ୍ଲାଙ୍କ ପେପରରେ କଲ ନା ରୋଲିଂ ପେପରରେ?
ମୁଁ ରୋଲିଂ ପେପର କରିଛି।
ଦୁଇ ସାଇଡ ଲେଖିଛ ନା ସିଙ୍ଗଲ ସାଇଡ?
ନା ବହୁତ ସାଇଡ ଲେଖିଛି ତ।
ମୁଁ ବନେଇନି ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି ତ ସେଥିପାଇଁ ପଚାରୁଥିଲି କାଲି ବନେଇବା ଷ୍ଟାର୍ଟ କରିବା।
ମାନେ ଏମିତି କୋଶ୍ଚିନ ରେ ମୁଁ ତ ସାଇଲେଣ୍ଟ ହେଇଗଲି।
ନାଇଁ କିନ୍ତୁ ମୁଁ ଯାଇଥିଲି କାଲି ସେ କହିଲେ କି 31 ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ ଲାଷ୍ଟ ଡେଟ୍ ଅଛି। ଆଉ ମୁଁ ସେଇଠୁ ତାଙ୍କୁ କହିଲି ସାର୍ ଆସାଇନମେଣ୍ଟ ଟା କେମିତି ବନେଇବି? ଜାଣିନି ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି ଟିକେ ଦେଖାନ୍ତୁ ସେ ସେଇଠୁ ପିଲା ସବୁ ସବମିଟ କରିଥିଲେ। ସେ ଅଲରେଡି ତାଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ପିଲା ସବମିଟ କରିଛନ୍ତି ସେ ଦେଖେଇଲେ ମତେ ଆମର ଏଇ
ଅଦର କଲେଜ ମାନଙ୍କରେ ସବମିଟ ହେଲାଣି ବଟ ଏଇ ଏସ୍ ଏସ୍ କଲେଜରେ ସବମିଟ କରିବାକୁ ନାହାନ୍ତି। ସବମିଟ କରୁନାହାନ୍ତି ଆମେ ନେଇକି ଯାଉଛୁ କିନ୍ତୁ ସେ ରଖୁନାହାନ୍ତି ଆମେ ଆଉ କଣ କରିପାରିବୁ? ଆମ
ହଁ
ଏସ୍ ଏସ୍
ତାଙ୍କ
କଲେଜ
ହିସାବରେ
ଗ୍ରୁପ
ଚାଲିବ ସେମାନେ ଯେବେ କହୁଛନ୍ତି ସେବେ
ଆମ
ସବମିଟ
ଏସ୍
କରିବେ।
ଏସ୍ କଲେଜ ଗୋଟେ ଗ୍ରୁପ ଟା ଅଛି ଭାଇ
ହଁ
ସେଥିରେ ଆମେ ଯୋଉ ଆଡ ଅଛୁ ସେମାନେ ପ୍ରାୟ ପେସେସ୍ କରୁଛନ୍ତି କାଲି 2ଟା ଝିଅ ନେଇକି ଯାଇଥିଲେ। ସେମାନେ ଆସିଥିଲେ କୋଉଠୁ ସାକ୍ଷୀ ଗୋପାଳ ସେପଟୁ ଆସିଥିଲେ ଏ କୋଣାର୍କ ଲାଇନରୁ ଆସିଥିଲେ। ସେମାନେ ରିଟର୍ଣ କରିକି ପୁଣି ଗଲେ।
ଓହୋ ସେମାନେ
ଯଦି ଆପଣ
ହଇରାଣ କରୁଛନ୍ତି।
ନ ରଖିବା କଥା ଗୋଟେ ମେସେଜ କରିବେନି।
ହଁ ହଁ
ଗ୍ରୁପ
ମେସେଜ କରିଦବା କଥା।
ଗ୍ରୁପରେ ମେସେଜ କରିବେନି ଆମେ ବି ରଖିବୁନି ତ କେହି ଆସନ୍ତୁ ନାହିଁ। ଅପ୍ରିଲ 6 ପରେ ଆସନ୍ତୁ ସମସ୍ତେ। ମେସେଜ ଟା କଲେ ହନ୍ତା। କିଏ କୋଉଠି ରହୁଛି ସବମିଟ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଆସୁଛି ତ ଏମିତି କଣ ଠିକ ହଉଛି ନା କଣ?
ହଁ ସିଏ କୋଉଠି କଣ ପର୍ଟିକୁଲାର ଲୋକେସନରେ ଅଛନ୍ତି ସମସ୍ତେ କିଏ କେବେ ଆସିକି ସବମିଟ କରିକି ଯାଉଛି।
ଏଇଟା ତ କେହି ଫ୍ରି ନାହାନ୍ତି ବୋଲି ତ ଆମେ ଡିଷ୍ଟାନ୍ସରେ କରୁଛୁ ନା। ଯଦି ଫ୍ରି ଥାନ୍ତେ
ହଁ
ଡିଷ୍ଟାନ୍ସ ରେ କରିଥାନ୍ତୁ। ସିଏ
ଦେଖ କଥା
ବୁଝୁନାହାନ୍ତି
ହୁଅ
ଖାଲି
ତାଙ୍କ ତାଙ୍କ ହିସାବରେ ତମକୁ ଚାଲିବାକୁ ପଡିବ ନା କଣ କରିବ।
ଯାହାହେଲେ ଗୋଟେ ଟିଚର ସେଠି ଭଲସେ ଆମେ ଯାର ଷ୍ଟୁଡେଣ୍ଟ ମାନେ ଆମକୁ ଟିକେ ଭଲସେ ବୁଝେଇବ ନା ନାଇଁ ଯେ ଏମିତି ଚିଡଚିଡ୍ ହେଇ କଥାବାର୍ତ୍ତା କଲେ ଆମେ କଣ ବୁଝିବୁ କଣ?
ତମେ ତ ଏ ବିଷୟରେ ସବୁବେଳେ ଜାଣିଛ ଆମେ ତ ବି ସବୁବେଳେ ଏ ବିଷୟରେ ଜାଣିଛୁ ଆମେ ଜାଣିନୁ ବୋଲି ତ ବୁଝିବା ପାଇଁ ଯାଉଛୁ ଜାଣିଥିଲେ କାଇଁ ଯାଇଥାନ୍ତୁ ବୁଝିବା
ଆମେ
ପାଇଁ
ଜାଣିଥିଲେ ବୁଝିବା ତମକୁ ଯାଇଥାନ୍ତୁ କି ସିଏ ଗୋଟେ କିଛି ବୁଝଉନାହାନ୍ତି ଖାଲି ଚିଡଚିଡ୍ ହଉଛନ୍ତି ଗୋଟେ ହେଲା ଭଳିଆ ମୁଣ୍ଡ ଖରାପ ହେଇଯାଉଛି। ଆପଣଙ୍କର କୋଉ କଲେଜ ଅଛି?
ମୋର ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି ଷ୍ଟଡି ସେଣ୍ଟରଟା ହଉଛି ଜେକେବିକେ ମୁଁ ଏଠି ଭୁବନେଶ୍ୱରରେ ଅଛି ତ ସେଥିପାଇଁ ଏଇ ବିଜେପି କଲେଜରେ ବୁଝୁଥିଲି।
ମୁଁ
ଜେକେବିକେ ରେ
ଏବେ ଭାବୁଛି ମୁଁ ଭୁବନେଶ୍ୱର ରଖିଥିଲେ ବହୁତ ବଢିଆ ହେଇଥାନ୍ତା ବେକାର ପୁରୀ
ହଁ
ରଖିକି
ଷ୍ଟଡି ସେଣ୍ଟର ତମ ଘରଟା କୋଉଠି କି ସେଇ ପୁରୀରେ କି?
ଆମ ଘର ହଉଛି ବ୍ରହ୍ମଗିରି।
ଆଚ୍ଛା ଆଚ୍ଛା ତମକୁ ଏତେ ବାଟ ଦୂର ହେଇଥାନ୍ତା ନା ଭୁବନେଶ୍ୱର ଆସିବା ପାଇଁ।
ହେଲେ ଭାଇ ଏତେ ହଇରାଣ ହବାକୁ ପଡିନଥାନ୍ତା।
ହଁ ହଁ ହଁ।
ଏମିତି ବ୍ରହ୍ମଗିରିରୁ 4 ଥର ଫେରିକି ଆସିବା ପାଇଁ ପଡୁଛି ଏମିତି କଣ ଗୋଟେ ଥର ଯାଇଥାନ୍ତୁ ଦେଇଦେଇକି ଆସିଥାନ୍ତୁ।
ହଁ
ଏମିତି 4 ଥର
ସେମାନେ
ଯାଇକି
ପୁରା
ଆସୁଛୁ ନା
ସବମିଟ
ନାଇଁ କି?
କରିଲେଣି ବହୁତ ସାରା ପିଲା ସବମିଟ କରିଛନ୍ତି ଆମରି ଏଇ ଫାଷ୍ଟ ଇୟର ହିଷ୍ଟ୍ରି ବାଲା ବି ବହୁତ ସବମିଟ କରିଛନ୍ତି ଦେଖେଇଲେ ମତେ।
ସେ ପୁଣି ଅଛନ୍ତି ହଁ ଗୋଟେ ଟିଚର ମାନେ ଭଲସେ ବୁଝେଇବ ତାଙ୍କର ସେଇଟା କିଛି ନାହିଁ। ଫୋନ କରି ରିସିଭ୍ କରିବେନି ଫୋନ କଲେ କାହିଁ ଫୋନ କରୁଛ? ଆମେ ତ ଆପଣଙ୍କୁ ମାନେ କିଛି ରିଜନ ଅଛି ବୋଲି ଫୋନ କରୁଛୁ ନା ଆମେ ଅଯଥା ଆପଣଙ୍କ ସହିତ କଥା ହେବୁ ବୋଲି ଫୋନ କରୁଛୁ। ମୁଣ୍ଡ ଖରାପ ହେଇଯାଉଛି। ଓହୋ।
ହଉ ଠିକ ଅଛି। ଦେଖ ଯାଇକି ବୁଝ ଆଉଥରେ କେବେ ହଉଛି ନହେଲେ ସେ ଯୋଉ ଡେଟରେ କହୁଛନ୍ତି ସେଇ ଡେଟରେ ସବମିଟ କର ଆଉ।
ଯଦି
ହ୍ୟାଲୋ
ଡେଟ୍ ପଡିବ
ହ୍ୟାଲୋ।
ହଁ କୁହନ୍ତୁ।
ଭଉଣୀ ତମେ ପୁରୀର?
ଆମ ଘର ବ୍ରହ୍ମଗିରି ହଁ କହୁନାହାନ୍ତି।
ତମେ ପୁରୀ ଏସିଏସରେ କରୁଛ?
ହଁ ହଁ।
ମୋର ବି ସେଇଠି ସେଣ୍ଟର।
ଓ।
ହୁଁ ତ ତମେ ଆସାଇନମେଣ୍ଟ ସବମିଟ କରିନ ଏପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ?
ନା ନା।
ଓହୋ ନାଇଁ ମୁଁ
ତମେ
ବି
ଗୋଟେ
କରିନି କିନ୍ତୁ ସିଏ ହଉଛି ମାନେ କଣ 2ଟା ପରେ ସବମିଟ କରାଉଛନ୍ତି।
କିନ୍ତୁ ସେ ମନା କରେ ଅପ୍ରିଲ 6 ପରେ ଆସିବ।
କେବେ କହିଲେ?
ଅପ୍ରିଲ 6 ପରେ।
ତମେ ପିଜି ବୋଲି କହିଛ ତାଙ୍କୁ MA ବୋଲି?
ହଁ।
ଓହୋ ହଉ ମୁଁ ଏଇ ପୁରୀରେ ପାଖରେ ମୁଁ ଏଇଠି ରହୁଛି ମୁଁ ଭାବିଛି ଶୁକ୍ରବାର ଯିବି ମୁଁ ତମକୁ ଜଣେଇବି ନହେଲେ ନାହିଁ। ସେ
ଆପଣ
କେତେ
ଏସିଏସ୍
ହାଁ
କଲେଜ ଗ୍ରୁପରେ ଏସିଏସ୍ କଲେଜ ଗ୍ରୁପରେ ଆଡ୍ ଅଛନ୍ତି କି?
ନା ନା ଏସିଏସ୍ କଲେଜ ଗ୍ରୁପରେ ମୁଁ ଆଡ୍ ନାହିଁ।
ଓହୋ।
ହୁଁ। ନାଇଁ ସିଏ ମତେ କିନ୍ତୁ କହିଲେ ମୁଁ ବି 2ଥର ଯାଇକି ଫେରିକି ଆସିଲିଣି ସେ କହିଲେ ହଉଛି ଯେ 2ଟା ପରେ ସେ ସବମିଟ କରୁଛନ୍ତି।
ଟିକେ
ତମକୁ
ଭଲସେ
କଣ କହିଲେ ସିଏ?
ଆମକୁ କହିଲେ ଯେ ଅପ୍ରିଲ ମାସରେ ଆସ ଆମେ ଅପ୍ରିଲ ମାସରେ ରଖିବି ଏବେ ରଖିବୁନି।
ତମେ କେବେ ଯାଇଥିଲ କି?
ମାର୍ଚ୍ଚ 10ରେ।
ଓହୋ। ନାଇଁ ମୁଁ ମତେ ବି ସେ ଫାଷ୍ଟ ସେୟା ହିଁ କହିଥିଲେ କିନ୍ତୁ ତାପରେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆଉ ଥରେ ବୁଝିଥିଲି କହିଲେ ହଉଛି ଏବେ ସବମିଟ ହଉଛି କିନ୍ତୁ 2ଟା ପରେ ଆସ। ସେଇଆ
ହୁଁ
କହିଲେ। ଓହୋ
ହଉ ଠିକ ଅଛି।
ତମେ ସେ ଗ୍ରୁପରେ ଅଛ କି?
ଏସିଏସ୍ କଲେଜ ଗ୍ରୁପରେ?
ହୁଁ।
ହଁ ହଁ।
ଆଚ୍ଛା ମତେ ଟିକେ ଆଡ କରିଦବ?
ହଁ ମତେ ମେସେଜ କରନ୍ତୁ ମୁଁ ଆଡ୍ କରିଦେବି।
ତୁମ ନମ୍ବର ଟା?
ମୋ ନମ୍ବରଟା ନେଇଯାଇଥାଅ 637222।
ଟିକେ ରୁହନ୍ତୁ। 63
722
ହଁ 63 722
477
477
05।
05 ଠିକ ଅଛି।
ଏଇଟା ମୋ କଣ୍ଟାକ୍ଟ ନମ୍ବର ଏଇଟା ମୋ ହ୍ୱାଟ୍ସଆପ୍ ନମ୍ବର।
ଓକେ ଧନ୍ୟବାଦ।
ଥ୍ୟାଙ୍କ ୟୁ ଠିକ ଅଛି ହଁ
ଆଜ୍ଞା।
ହଁ ହଉ ଠିକ ଅଛି।